I wish I knew how to swear, to cuss, to use the F word, or even the middle finger. I'm sometimes envious of people who can do all this. At the very least, it helps them avoid ulcers. But I can't, not because I'm polite or faith-oriented or afraid. Rather, because I've been taught differently, and using such expressions of anger or frustration sound simply fake to my own ears. So I resort to the rational, the intellectual, the analytical when I look at a particular situation. But that also at times is an example of wasted time and energy. I say all this because over the past month, I was worried about the ethnic cleansing of Armenians from the enclave of Nagorno-Karabakh as a consequence of the recent events in the South Caucasus. And now, whilst that conflict is still brewing and Armenia remains fragile and is vulnerable to occupation itself, I worry also about the resurgence of violence in the Gaza-Israel context. So no wonder my GP worries about my blood pressure. Yet, short of any other more practical tool at my disposal, I revert again today to this YouTube episode as food for thought, or seeds for thought if you prefer. Take them, reject them, frame them, disperse them, bin them, or even pickle them. It's entirely up to you. Here are my 7 foods or seeds for thought. 1. I condemn the abhorrent and indiscriminate attack of 7th October on Israeli civilians, young or old, in the various settlements or kibbutzim within the Gaza envelope. With the same breath, I also condemn the taking of hostages, again, young or old, some of them peace-seeking like you and me, by those militants who attacked the various outposts bordering the open-air prison since 2007 that we all now know as Gaza. 2. By the same token, I condemn the abhorrent and equally indiscriminate, let alone vengeful pounding of Gaza by Israeli fighter jets. This punitive retaliation by Israel is equally atrocious. Allegedly using white phosphorus bombs to attack buildings, let alone killing civilians, razing neighborhoods such as El Rimal, eliminating ordinary Palestinian men, women, and children in a moment of rage, or ordering 1 million Gaza residents to migrate south of the Gaza Wadi in order to create a terra nullius for Israel are barbarous acts too. 3. The death toll in Israel stands, as I understand, at 1,300, as well as 126 hostages. The death toll in Gaza stands at some 2,400 and mounting due to the unrelenting bombing raids. I mourn them all, but I also ask Europe to mourn them too. What message do you honestly think we give the world when our politicians constantly talk about the right of self-defense by Israel and leave the Palestinians entirely to NGOs and humanitarian agencies? Are we meant to suggest that Israelis count but Palestinians don't? That the latter in our eyes are children of a lesser God? Having ignored Armenians during the Nagorno-Karabakh war, it pains me even more that some politicians in the West are now equally ignoring Palestinians during the Gaza-Israel war. Is this what our morality, born out of our democracy, teaches us? 4. As you and I know, social media is abuzz with messages. with trolls, with fake news. I listened to one 19-year-old Israeli young woman speaking in a YouTube clip from her settlement that is less than 3 miles away from the Gaza border. She spoke not falsely, but truly, not artificially, but from the heart, movingly in Hebrew. And her finger of accusation was pointing squarely at Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government, that includes frighteningly fascist ministers. In her opinion, they had contributed to the tragedy that struck her community. So I think that Netanyahu's decision to enter Gaza via a land invasion, if validated, let alone all the pounding that is being visited upon the strip at the moment, will be dictated in part by his attempt to save his own political skin one more time. Because entering Gaza could well create mammoth problems and drag unknown unknowns, to recall Donald Rumsfeld here, into a whole region: Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, Jordan, and further afield. 5. The Arab populations across the whole MENA and Gulf regions are mobilized in support of Palestinians. Probably you've watched and seen some of those on your TV screens. And no wonder also that their rulers are careful. Some of them are sincere in their efforts to support Palestinians, whilst others have their instinct for survival kicking into action. So maybe the White House and State Department in DC should factor this into their foreign policy decisions and advise their closest ally, Israel, accordingly. 6. Israel claims that it is targeting terrorists in the midst of the massive civilian population of Gaza. Really? I advise them to check Article 50 of the Geneva Convention, where its additional Protocol 1 advises, and I quote here, that persons who have not committed hostile acts, but whose status seems doubtful because of circumstances, should be considered to be civilians until further information is available, and should therefore not be attacked. 7. The UN Secretary General made it clear yesterday that even wars have rules. The overarching aim of international humanitarian law is to protect civilians, all civilians. They apply to all parties and to all conflicts, state actors and non-state actors. As the heads of the International Federation of the Red Cross and the International Committee of the Red Cross said in a rare public statement, there is no hierarchy of pain and suffering in the law of armed conflict. The rules of war exist to help preserve humanity when needed most, and they must be followed today in Gaza too. They are, and they should remain, our compass to ensure the welfare of our brittle humanity. Enough said for this autumnal Sunday. Evidently, there is much more to say, but perhaps not for now, when the wounds are so raw and when we don't really know where we are heading tomorrow. So suffice it to end this unplanned and abridged episode by going a bit metaphysical on you and concluding that shock and anger are fine in such instances, whereas self-righteous rage is both dangerous and counterproductive. Over the past week, I wrote 3 digital bubbles on the Gaza-Israel war. In one of them, I held the rage factor by its horns. I reminded readers that an eye for an eye is not the best policy. After all, remember that Palestinians have been putting up with a searing injustice for 56 unending years. It is called, by the way, an occupation which is wrapped into an apartheid system that still has no end in sight. So please, let us not argue over who has agency over suffering or rage or self-righteousness. And let us add that an eye for an eye eventually makes the whole world go blind. So let me end by saying that I will seek peace with justice and security, an objective, though, that can only be achieved via the end of a festering occupation. And who knows, maybe there's still a twinkle somewhere out there in people's hearts and consciences that will make this come true. Meanwhile, I still will not swear or cuss or use the F word or even point the middle finger.